Welcome back to Logan, Rando, Aquascaping. My name is Logan, and today I'm going to walk you through some basic tips for getting through those first couple weeks of a new aquarium. As many of you probably know, those first 20 days or so can be really delicate. I call that the red zone of your aquarium, where the ecosystem and the natural fauna are still developing in the filter and in the soil. So things are really delicate, and the aquarium is really susceptible to plant melt and algae. So over the last 8 years that I've been in this hobby, I've sort of been experimenting with different techniques, and I think I've got some basic tips down that should help you out. So today we're going to be talking about my UNS 45U that I flooded exactly 1 week ago. This is my first aquarium in my new space in San Diego, and for the first time I'm working with some pretty hard tap water. The tap water here comes out at about 300 parts per million TDS. Conversely, Portland and Albany, New York, they were more around that 30 TDS. So, you know, rather than go down the RO route, which works great but is a little bit of a hassle, I said to myself, you know what, I want to try this tap water, see what kind of results I get, and then go from there. And I'm happy to say that about 7 days post flooding, things are looking really good. Usually you're going to see plant melt within the first 7 days or so, and I'm not seeing any signs of plant melt. In fact, the Eleocharis mini from Ultum Nature Systems that Boost Plant so graciously sent me is looking really beautiful. The colors are vibrant, and it's starting to spread out a little bit and look really fluffy. So signs are looking good. Let me walk you through some of the equipment that I use to get through those first 20 days, because your tech is really going to set you up for success. So I'm a massive believer in lighting your tank with high quality lighting and over filtering the tank. So I'm using the OASE Biomaster Thermo 350 on this tank. This is only a 10-gallon tank. This is the UNS 45U. So you could argue that the OASE 350 is overkill, but cool thing about these filters is you can reduce the flow, and that's exactly what I did here. I have the flow on about 50%, but being such a large filter for this size tank, it allows me to house a massive amount of biomedia, and it provides extra volume of water, which, you know, dilution is always the solution. Small tanks can be a little tricky because in that little bit of water, a lot can go wrong. So if you can increase your volume through the filtration, that's going to help you out a lot. But big fan of these filters, and being in San Diego in September, I don't even have to run the heater. My apartment stays about 72, 73, which is around 22 Celsius, which is about the temperature I like to run my tanks. So let's talk about the lighting. As for the lighting, I am a huge fan of TWINSTAR, and I'm using their S line of lighting. So because this is a 45 centimeter tank, I went with the TWINSTAR 450S. This is the version 3. So they did just come out with the version 4, but the version 3 is a pretty big improvement on the version 2. It's got a lot more red in the spectrum, which, you know, plants really like. Big fan of this light. However, it is a powerhouse. It has given me algae with previous builds, so I've got it reduced down to about 75% intensity. What I recommend starting your tank at, if you're using a high par light like this, is about that 50 to 75%. When in doubt, err on the side of caution and go lower. And then, you know, maybe a month in, once the tank is established, if you don't have algae, every couple weeks or so, you know, ramp it up 10%. But go low in the beginning if you have a quality light. So I run this light for 7 hours per day. That's how I run all my tanks, in the beginning of the tank's life cycle all the way to the very end. You know, I like to keep as many things constant as possible so that you're only manipulating one variable at a time, and the photo period, aka the length of the time you run the light per day, that always remains the same for me. So for CO2, I run CO2 on all of my tanks, and this one is no exception. Now, those first couple weeks, I'm always still dialing in the bubbles per second. Right now, I'm running it pretty hard at about 3 bubbles per second. I got a drop checker on there to sort of monitor the parts per million of CO2 in the water. Really, you want that drop checker to turn lime green, which means it's saturated with 30 parts per million of CO2. You want that to happen 2 hours after the lights come on. Why this is the case is because that drop checker has about a 2-hour delay between what you're seeing and what reality is. So if your lights come on at noon and it's lime green at 2, in actuality, that means that when your lights pop on, your water is saturated with 30 parts per million of CO2, which means when that light turns on, your plants are ready to work and they're ready to build new tissue. So I'm still dialing that in, and I'm finding that I'm having to run the CO2 quite hard on this tank, most likely because I've got hard water, and also because I have a surface skimmer, which is adding in oxygen and gas exchange. As for the regulator, I'm using the UNS mini regulator. Love this regulator. It's super tiny, but it functions like a pro full-size regulator. So I have it over here off to the side of my tank on a nice 5-pound aluminum CO2 bottle. If you're new to the world of CO2, I recommend getting the biggest pressurized canister you can afford, and you can usually get these and get them refilled via the exchange program at a welding supply store. So look up what the local ones in your area are, but they're usually about $30 US to refill. If you're using a little paintball canister or a little soda stream, you're probably gonna have to refill those quite frequently. So that's what I'm doing for the tech, but where the beauty lies is in the maintenance. So maintenance will help you get through the red zone of your new aquarium quite gracefully. And I've always used the ADA method of water changes. So when you're adding aqua soil to a tank after you've just built it, you know, it's gonna be releasing ammonia. Now the cool thing about UNS Controsand is that it releases less ammonia than its competitors. So you're not gonna get these massive ammonia spikes. That said, I've still had great results sticking to that ADA method. So what that means is the first week of a tank's life, and I just completed that first week, you're gonna be doing daily water changes of 50%. Second week, you do it every other day. Week after that, you know, twice a week, and so on until you get to the desired amount of water changes per week. I'm a 2 smaller water change a week kind of guy. I find I get the best results that way. It gets my hands in there doing micro maintenance and, you know, scrubbing hardscape and trimming plants. So what that's gonna do is it's gonna manage the ammonia levels, and ammonia spikes when you have a new tank, that can really contribute to plant melt. So if you're working with tissue culture plants, they're not gonna do well if there's a large ammonia spike. So you really wanna stick to those frequent heavy water changes in the beginning and just monitor things. If you're using tap water, make sure that you're dechlorinating when you add that new water in, and monitor the hardness and the TDS in the beginning. If you're new to the area, test your water, see what pH it is, see what the TDS is, do a GH, KH test. This is all stuff that, especially in the beginning, it's important to be hyper aware of, but as you develop as an aquascaper, you can begin taking a more holistic approach and do more evidence-based decision making. So I haven't measured GH and KH. I just know that the water here is hard. I see calcium stains. So I'm just sort of monitoring things, and so far the plants look super healthy. That said, I'm probably not gonna keep any soft water, you know, fauna in here like Caridina shrimp like I had in Portland. So I'll most likely be going with Neo Caridina shrimp, which tend to really thrive in 250 TDS plus water. Now here's the secret weapon that I've been using in this tank that I think you'll find really interesting. So I have been sent some bacteria in pill form by Boost Plant, and this is from a company that I really do trust, AQUARIO. This is their Neo Bacter, and these little pills are something that you can use during the startup of your tank. Every 3 days, you pop the pill open, dump it into your tank, let it cycle through the water. It'll usually cloud the water up within an hour or so, but you're already doing your frequent water changes, so no big deal. And this is essentially supposed to contain dormant bacteria that will come alive when exposed to the system. So I plan on doing a deep dive into the science of these things. You know, I tend to be a little bit skeptical with, you know, magic in a bottle, especially where beneficial bacteria is concerned. I think this is one of those topics that would really be interesting to dive into, to see biochemically how these actually work and whether or not they would make any sort of a significant difference in the aquarium. If you'd like to get your hands on some and try it out for yourself, you can go ahead and check the link in my description. This isn't any sort of a sponsored promotion. I just like to try new stuff in this hobby, especially when things are sent over to me. It's always fun to experiment and see what types of results I get. Moving forward, we'll get through that ADA method of water change, and I would say in a couple weeks, I'll start adding the first algae eaters. So I'm thinking some snails, and I'm also thinking some Neo Caridina shrimp. Let me know down below in the comments what color shrimp you would add to this tank. I got some really cool suggestions for fish, but I'd love to hear your suggestion if you haven't commented yet. What type of fish do you think would work really well in this tank? And stay tuned for my new video coming out pretty soon. I just recreated behind me my UNS 60U that I had up in Portland. I created a whole dark start series on that, and I was able to move the hardscape, huge rocks, like 30-pound plus rocks, down to San Diego via a moving company, and just recreated the tank. So we'll be planting that soon and doing a full tutorial and video on the planting process. So lots of exciting stuff coming. I've been loving it down here in San Diego, and you know, it's been really fun fun getting my place all set up with these aquariums. They just bring so much life and beauty into my space. So thank you so much for watching. I always appreciate the support on this little channel. It means a lot to me. I'll catch you guys and girls in the next video. Take care.